Commonplace books have a long history amongst philosophers, thinkers, and writers, and essentially what a commonplace book is it is a book to collect thoughts and ideas and quotes in one place and to keep them organized. Before we could look up knowledge and information on the internet easily, and before we had kind of 24-hour access to resources, it was important as a way of learning and remembering to take notes and to write down quotes when you came across them so you could refer to them later. Ancient philosophers like Aristotle and Seneca talked about the collection of quotations to reinforce one's own arguments. Seneca had this really beautiful analogy that collecting quotes was like bees collecting pollen from flowers, and that the ideas, the quotes that you collected would go through a fermentation process, and the output, your own thoughts and ideas, your own words, would come out as the honey at the other end. During the Enlightenment, the concept of the commonplace book was formalized, with scholars like John Locke and John Milton creating systems for how one could organize a commonplace book. John Locke very famously has written a full guide on how to construct your own commonplace book using his specific system of ideas, and he referred to his commonplace book as a chest of drawers in which to keep his ideas. Other famous people who have kept commonplace books throughout history include writers like Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Mark Twain, and Virginia Woolf, as well as Thomas Jefferson. Commonplace books have a really illustrious history as a way to collect and formalize ideas and a way to develop your learnings as you go on to produce your own work, whether that be writing or something else. So in talking about creating a commonplace book for artists, the concept of copying down thoughts and quotes and ideas that you come across in the world to develop your own work is also something that can be seen reflected in the kind of academy style of art scholarship in earlier periods as well. When someone went to study to become an artist, a large part of what their work was to copy either a specific person, so they were an apprentice in a studio specifically, and they would copy an artist's work, and they were expected to essentially carry on that artist's legacy by continuing his kind of body of work into the future, his ideas, his style, his themes. Art was less about the individual and creating an individual style, and more about learning a specific structure to work within. You can also see people studying at the Academy of Fine Arts in France that they will be sitting around and they'll be copying down ancient Greek statues and studying the human form, all very specifically, all very much the same as each other. This type of copying was not seen as plagiaristic, but rather it was a mode of learning. It was the predominant mode of learning art throughout history. So what I'm suggesting to you in terms of a commonplace book for artists is that it's a place where you can copy down other artists' work in order to develop your own style. The point is to not come out and be working exactly the same as any one artist that you copy or study. The idea is to understand the history of the work that you're trying to create, because the majority of artwork sits within a context of history. It isn't isolated, and especially in the modern day where art, it's very hard to branch out and do something completely new. So all art sits within kind of a historical context and reverberates back and forth between things that other artists have done in the past, and it's really important to understand how other artists have achieved similar things to what you want to achieve previously so that you can go forward and do your own thing. For me specifically, what I like to do with my commonplace book is I have a page that I will use to copy down a specific art. Like I will set a page aside for a specific artist, and then looking at their work, I will kind of create a sort of collage composition of different parts of their work. So I won't just copy one set image, I'll kind of recompose it myself to fit on the page that I'm working on. And then I will look at interviews from the artist and I will try and like find a quote that really expresses what that artist has set out to achieve with their work kind of broadly. Like Usually you can find one quote that sort of encompasses their project with their art. And so I include that on the page when I create that piece. You might want to use your commonplace book in other ways, and there are probably hundreds of ways which you could use a more visual language in a commonplace book structure in order to refine your own work, in order to practice mark making, explore different palettes, collect quotes from artists and the reason that they work in specific ways, or how they structure their day, the larger scheme, the larger project of their work. And all of that information can be really useful to you in developing your own practice and your own style. I think we have to be really careful when we talk about copying within the modern context. When I talk about copying work into your commonplace book, that is a private study space for you to take ideas from the world and kind of explore and understand them better. The point is not to copy work and put it straight back out into the world copied. The point is to use what you've learned and understood to create something new that's your own thing. And while in the past, artists were expected to copy and learn a certain very formal structure of art creation, in the modern world, we're expected to find our own style. And I think there's a bit of a misconception that the style is just something that we come up with one day, that one day we've created a really individual bespoke style that is no one else's and is very much our own. I would argue that the creation of style comes from the study of other artists' work in order to understand what does and doesn't work and what you do and don't like doing. And then at the end of that, what you create that's a little bit of your own thoughts and ideas, a little bit of other artists' thoughts and ideas, and things that you've grabbed from other places altogether. That's what builds your own style. It isn't something that you just can dig out of the ground and it comes fully formed to you. It's something that you create and build. So the work of creating a commonplace book, I think, is a really important study space where you can start to work towards creating your own style. The other thing that I found with my common book practice is that the act of copying allows you to understand the artist and the way that they work in a way that simply looking doesn't. Because you're looking so closely and you're copying each line and you're understanding the structure of the piece and how it's composed, where the light comes from, where the shadows fall, all of those things means that you're looking so much more closely than if you just passively look at a piece of art. And this understanding of how art pieces are created and built is something that's so transferable into any kind of artwork that you want to create for yourself. I really encourage you that, as well as passively looking, going to art exhibitions, looking at artwork online, getting out books from the library, experiencing art of all kinds, I really encourage you that copying down pieces of art is a really, really great way to understand what an artist was trying to do in a much more concrete and experiential way. Alright, so how do you start your own creative commonplace book? My commonplace book is in a sketchbook that I made for myself. I bound it myself. It has watercolor paper. Because I'm using different mediums, I wanted a paper that will hold up to me using acrylic or watercolor paints, inks, and won't bleed through to the other side of the page. I recommend that you get a book that isn't too special. You want to be able to make mistakes. You want to be able to really get in there and use the space as somewhere that you can explore. And so you don't want your most special sketchbook put aside for this. You want a workspace that you want to go to and do the work in. And then what you want to do is that anytime you come across an artist that you feel inspired by, whose work is interesting to you, take some time to really look closely at their work and maybe make a sketch or a drawing of their work. Try and experiment with the techniques that they're using, the mediums that they're using. Try and really get in there and understand the work that they're creating. Maybe take some notes down of things that the artist has said, the reasons behind the work that they make. What is their work about? Why are they making it? What does it mean to them? Those are all really useful things to reflect on when you're creating your own work and when you're creating your own arts practice, because you want to have in your own self a really strong idea about why creating artwork is important to you and what you're setting out to do when you do it. That might just be it's a relaxing practice for you, it's something that you find joy in a world that's really chaotic and hard to understand, or it might be something more specific that you're trying to go out there and say with your artwork. I think it's really interesting and relevant to reflect on what other artists have said about why they create their work, and then use that as a bit of a springboard to really understand yourself and the way that you're creating your own work. I would also encourage you to use this as a space that's possibly private. You may want to share the work that you're doing here as kind of a part of your arts practice, but largely it's an exploratory space and it's for you alone. It's not really work for the general public's consumption. I'm going to share the work that I do in my commonplace book as an example of creating this commonplace practice, but in essence, because it's copies of other artists' work, it's not really about creating work that you share with the public. It's about your own reflection and your own study and building up your own arts practice to be really strong and your style to be really informed by other art and really embedded within the context of the art history that you want it to be embedded in. So creating a commonplace book and using it as an artistic space to explore copying or reproducing the artwork of other artists isn't the opposite of creativity. It's really the starting point of creativity. It's like that Seneca quote from the start of this video. You have to collect the pollen from all about in order to ferment it down and create the honey that's going to be the finished artwork that you create at the end. I think a commonplace book is a really good place for quiet and private reflection. I think it's a really great way to slow down and reflect on specific artworks when we're in a society now where everything is so accessible. So you can go on Pinterest or look at Instagram and just see work after work after work of other artists, like all coming at you all at once, and it's really hard to reflect on a specific work or a specific practice or how one thing was specifically made when there's so much content coming at us all the time. Using a commonplace book as a way to slow down and study really specifically can be a really helpful way to build up your own practice and your own style. Let me know in the comments if commonplace booking is something that you already do and whether you're using this space as a creative space to explore visual artwork, or whether it's somewhere you've just been writing quotes and whether you're going to change that up. I'm really interested to hear about how other people use their commonplace book space. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to see more content from me, I put up new videos each week. Please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video.